Good afternoon, colleagues. Apologies, we were just waiting for connections. We have a number of speakers from all around the world, particularly in the Pacific. It's obviously very late at night for them, so we are grateful for their time. We're still expecting Sefanaia to join us in a few minutes. So I think we'll just get underway and we might reorder our speakers. And Andie, if it's okay with you, we'll start with you first and then go to Basmah. So we'll begin now. Thanks so much, Andie. So welcome, colleagues. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome you to our 16th webinar in the 28 for 28 series. Today, we'll be discussing navigating resilience, climate challenges in small island developing states. My name is Katherine Lester. I'm the head of the UN Resident Coordinator's Office in the UAE. And today we'll delve into the unique climate challenges faced by small island developing states and explore some innovative approaches, successful adaptation measures and best practices in building resilience within these communities. Today, I'm extremely pleased to introduce quite an esteemed panel. We have the Director General for the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Programme, the head of the Pacific Subregional Office for the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Samoa, the Cook Islands, Niue and Tokelau, and the Regional Director for the Middle East for the United Nations World Tourism Organization. As I've just mentioned, Sefanaia will be joining us a little bit later, so I'd like to give the floor to Andie from ESCAP in the Pacific Subregional Office. Andie, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Soraya is going to help me with my slideshow. So can we have the next one, please? Okay, so I just wanted to show this slide, which illustrates the breadth of the membership of ESCAP. You know, so the organization I represent is the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. So we are the P in ESCAP, and so we have 14 members and 7 associate members. And so those of you who are tuning in from UAE and from faraway regions, I just wanted to show you this map of the Pacific so you could see really the expanse of the Pacific and how how scattered I suppose we are in this huge Pacific Ocean. And also I think relatively you can see the relative size of the countries. The biggest countries: Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and then Solomon Islands, Fiji, and then we get to the very small micro countries, and this is very relevant when we talk about the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please, Soraya. So I just wanted to do a plug for a publication that our office did last year, which was in the build-up to the commission session that we just completed about 10 days ago in ESCAP. And the thematic area was on climate action, which of course is very relevant to this webinar and the lead up, to the COP at the end of the year. And we had 4 chapters in this publication, and you can see we've provided the link at the bottom if people are interested in reading the publication online. So the thematic areas that we covered were basically the climate health nexus, ocean and climate synergies, climate smart and digital trade, and energy transition. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to show you here really is a mix of 2 things. The first one is progress in the SDGs, but in particular you can see where we are regressing, and unfortunately the biggest regression for the Pacific is actually in climate change. And so I'm very conscious that the UN Secretary General has been the message coming out very strongly from the UN Secretary General is about the regression in SDGs globally, and particularly in the lead up to the SDG summit, very shortly. But for the Pacific, of course, it's not a good story for us that the regression in climate actions. And on the right-hand side of the slide, I just wanted to share with the audience some key messages about, the climate position for the Pacific. And the first, of course, which I think, those who have been following, climate change negotiations and climate change, generally, is that for us in the Pacific, it is an I can never pronounce this properly, existential threat, which is at the very heart of the policy discourse. And that was why, I started off this presentation by showing you the map of the Pacific. And you can see that, in a map in the atlas, a number of Pacific countries really are dots, in this big Pacific Ocean. And we have a number of countries that will disappear with sea level rise. Total countries will disappear. And for a number of countries, islands will disappear. The Pacific has emerged as leaders in the global fight against climate change. And in the Pacific, we have been sounding the alarm about climate change, since the 1980s. And in many ways, we are the canary in the mines. And I can remember, in the 1980s, nobody believed us when we talked about the impacts of climate change. And you'll see that the text in red, for us, our strong voice is about the urgency to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal alive. And so, for us, when we talk about SDGs, accelerating the policy, we must accelerate the policy shifts that recognize, the primacy and the impacts of climate change in advancing our development aspirations. Next slide, please. So in this final slide, I just wanted to share with you the focus of the work of ESCAP, and as you can see, very similar to the 4 chapters of the thematic study that I showed in the first slide. We have a 4-point climate action agenda in ESCAP, which is supporting very much the priorities of the Pacific Island countries. And that is to strengthen the early warning for all Pacific small island developing states, and to include adaptation and loss and damage when we are addressing climate-related impacts. Secondly, we want to strengthen the links between ocean and climate change science, and to expand and facilitate access to data. And I know that Sefa's presentation will cover, these points in more detail. We also need to increase access to the internet and digital services and integrate digital policies. And we see that, climate smart and digitalization can actually help us in terms of our resilience to climate change. And one of the examples is to promote cross-border paperless trade procedures. And then finally, in terms, obviously we need to set ambitious targets to achieve SDG 7. And we at ESCAP are providing support in terms of sustainable energy transitions. And I know that a number of our colleagues, particularly in Tuvalu and Vanuatu, they would like to change that narrative to just energy transition. And I'm sure that at the forthcoming COP at the end of the year, they will be flying that banner. And finally, financing is always a strong message from the Pacific. It's accessible climate financing, but also financing for development. And we at ESCAP are supporting Pacific countries to engage with financiers and the private sector. So thank you very much for your attention, and that's my 5-minute spiel.
Thank you so very much, Andie, and really all recognition for how late it is in the day in Suva. So thank you so much for your time today. Sefanaia has just joined us and dropped off again. So I think what we'll do is we'll hand over now to Basmah, who's the Regional Director for the Middle East for the UN World Tourism Organization, for her reflections. Basmah, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Basmah, you're muted. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, and I'm very delighted to be here with everyone. Indeed, it's a very important topic. I believe that in the 80s, people didn't believe any harm or any changes will occur from climate change. But believe me, today in the 21st century, we are also at the UNWTO facing the same challenges with the tourism sector and with our stakeholders. So allow me please to greet everyone who's here. I'm happy to participate with you here in this webinar to represent UN World Tourism Organization and to talk about the relationship between climate change and tourism. As you know, climate change can alter landscapes, causing the loss of natural attractions that attract tourists. This affects both the domestic and international tourism. Furthermore, climate change increases the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events such as hurricanes, storms, and wildfires. These events can disrupt travel, damage infrastructure, and pose safety risks for tourists. And such disruptions can deter both domestic and international travelers. The shift in weather patterns and seasonality, changes in temperature, or the timing of natural phenomena like blossoms or migrations caused by climate change can also affect any visitor's preferences and lead to fluctuations in tourist arrivals. Also, climate change can pose risks to cultural heritage sites, which are a very important factor in tourism, and it also which will eventually affect traditional practices that are significant also for tourism and for the tourists. Rising sea levels, erosion, or changing weather patterns can jeopardize historical landmarks, archaeological sites, or cultural events, resulting in a loss of cultural tourism. Also, tourism itself may be directly impacted by climate change. It is highly likely that there will be an indirect impact, primarily linked to the concerns of tourists regarding the contribution of their trips to global warming. International tourists are increasingly becoming aware of issues related to climate change and global warming. To be more specific, tourists are also acutely aware that long-haul travel and leisure tourism could contribute to this global dilemma. Talking about small islands, we all know they are a top destination for millions of tourists each year. Their special geographical situation and their natural and cultural heritage richness make them unique for visitors, but at the same time confront them with a number of challenges and vulnerabilities. Particularly small islands developing states vary greatly in their economic and social performance and their level of international visitor arrivals, but many demonstrate a high level of dependence on tourism in terms of exports and contribution to GDP. They present small size, different characteristics such as small size with implications for pressure on resources and limited economic diversity, remoteness and isolation, leading to challenges for trading, but also to a unique biodiversity and cultural richness, and a maritime environment leading to strong tourism assets, but vulnerability to climate change. Also, their particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels. This can lead to coastal erosion and saltwater intrusion into freshwater supplies, but also increased vulnerability to storm surges and flooding. This can threaten also the infrastructure and agriculture and overall well-being of the SIDS. Also, the SIDS are prone to hurricanes and tropical storms, and climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of these events, leading to widespread destruction, loss of lives, and displacement of communities. These islands also, they often have small, vulnerable economies, heavily reliant on few economic sectors. This leads to economic losses, job insecurity, and increased social vulnerability. That's why tourism is important for SIDS. There are also 4 key distinctive challenges for islands: the crucial role of tourism in the sustainable development of islands, following the approach of the Rio +20 conference, which paid specific attention to tourism and its contribution to sustainable development, climate change, which is great, which is a great threat to many islands and requires a response from the tourism sector. Also, it requires, the response also requires a strong link between tourism and air transport policies and market positioning, including tourism products, diversification, and establishment of niche markets. And that would contribute to competitiveness and decrease vulnerability. With its close relationship to climate and natural environment, climate change is anticipated to have extensive impacts on sustainability and competitiveness of tourism destinations. Global climate change and climate policy will alter travel costs and accessibility, each of which are primary factors in travel decisions and geographic and seasonal patterns of tourism demand. Importantly, the significance of climate change to tourism is not solely in some distant and remote future. Rather, climate change is already affecting investments and operating decisions in the tourism sector, and it will become an ever more pivotal issue affecting the future of tourism development in the decades ahead. As we are approaching the 29th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP28, which will take place by the end of this year in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, I believe it will be an opportunity for all of us to provide policy orientations, guidelines, and other tools to the various tourism stakeholders in SIDS on how to address the challenges and how to develop and manage tourism in a sustainable manner for the benefit of local communities, and also to maximize the visitors' experience. Sustainable economic development, climate change, disaster risk management, and social development are all main thematic clusters that need to be addressed by the United Nations agenda, funds, and programs. Also adopting sustainable tourism practices and SIDS, such as promoting renewable energy, reducing carbon emissions in the tourism sector, and supporting eco-friendly initiatives can help protect natural resources and enhance the resilience of the tourism sector. I would like to also highlight here the importance of the Glasgow Declaration as a global commitment to accelerate action on climate change. the Glasgow Declaration on Climate Change in Tourism, initiated by UNWTO, is a catalyst for increased urgency about the need to accelerate climate action in tourism and to secure strong commitments to support the global goals to have emissions over the next decade and to reach net zero emissions as soon as possible before 2050. The declaration defines a clear and consistent sector-wide message and approach to climate action in the coming decade. The initiative supports its signatories by sharing knowledge and resources to better implement their commitments, fostering and supporting the work at destination level to develop and implement climate action plans, tracking and disclosing progress, implementing the commitments, and providing international recognition and visibility. The Glasgow Declaration encourages stakeholders in the tourism sector to set ambitious targets and to mitigate their carbon emissions and to reduce their environmental impact. It contributes to the resilience in the sector, in the tourism sector, to climate change impacts. And by implementing measures such as diversification of tourism products, climate-aware tourism promotion, improved infrastructure, the sector is preparing for changing climate conditions. Finally, I would like to conclude that transport-related CO2 emissions of the tourism sector are 22% of the whole emissions from the transport, and therefore enhanced cooperation with the transport sector is essential to the support the implementation of a high ambition scenario. At the same time, tourism has to determine its own high ambition scenario beyond transport, a scenario where tourism would transform towards low emission and highly efficient operations. I encourage you all also to check our UNWTO publication, Small Island Developing States, SIDS and Climate Change. It's available on our website. And I thank all of you, and thank you for inviting me for this important session. And I'm also inviting you all to join us tomorrow for our Insta webinar on energy to get some fresh ideas on what destinations are currently doing. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that, Basmah, and also for those tangible suggestions on how people can engage themselves as individuals. Thank you also for bringing the tourism angle to this discussion. If possible, can you please put the invitation or the link to the webinar in the chat that you just mentioned so that colleagues can follow that? I'm very pleased now to hand over to Mr. Sefanaia Nawadra, the Director General of the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, who is joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Apologies for the bit of a mix-up with timing. I'm in Paris at the moment, supporting our countries here in the plastics INC negotiations. For some reason, my clock had me down for a 2 p.m. start. I think it's daylight saving start or something in France right now, which might have caused the confusion. So my apologies. I'm honored to be able to speak to you. And can I ask Soraya if we go straight into the PowerPoint that I've shared?
Yes, Sefanaia, it's on the screen now. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Just to make you a bit aware of what SPREP is, we're the environmental intergovernmental organization for the Pacific. This year is our 30th anniversary. Our membership is the 14 Pacific Island countries, 7 Pacific Island territories, plus what we call our 5 metropolitan members. This is Australia, New Zealand, the UK, France, and the USA. So basically the countries that used to have used or still have territories in the Pacific. Our 4 areas of work are climate change, waste and pollution, biodiversity conservation, and environmental governance. Next slide, please. Is there any way of making the screen a bit bigger? I'm reading off the screen too, but it's projected small on this. Okay, hang on. Let me.
Sorry, Sefanaia.
Okay,
I think unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, that's
we're
fine.
in presentation.
Yeah, okay. Let me do something on my end, and I'll be able to follow better. Okay. In the area of climate change resilience, there are a few areas of work that we concentrate on. The first is to support Pacific Island countries in the UNFCCC process. I think a lot of you are aware of the nature of climate change negotiations. It's always very hectic, very multi-thematic. It's a challenge for our Pacific Island countries that come with small delegations to engage effectively. So there's a big role for the regional organizations in the Pacific. In the area of climate change, we coordinate all that amongst the regional organizations to support our countries and to help coordinate how they can effectively engage in the process. This includes a preparatory process that starts straight after each COP. So from Egypt, I think 2 months later, we were having our first preparatory process for COP28 in Dubai. And that will continue throughout the year to when we get to Dubai. We're grateful for the support that we receive from New Zealand and Australia. That support allows us to not only bring people over, but we've had a pavilion since Glasgow that's dedicated to the Pacific. It's very useful to provide a platform for our members and to also get those other parties to come and see what we're doing in the region. We also have a negotiations office. As you know, there's often no space to carry out strategic discussions for negotiations. So that's something that we have been able to provide for our members too. Finally, in that area, we are working with Australia on the bid for COP31. It's something that we will continue to develop going forward. The other area that we support is for national implementation in all areas of climate change, including mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, looking at natural solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation. Since 2019, SPREP has established the Pacific Climate Change Center. This is like our regional center of excellence for climate change to promote research and innovation in climate change. We also have the Pacific Meteorological Council and desk that I'll elaborate on later. And the other area that we have been working on is access to climate change finance. As you all know, we don't have the finance to be able to do things. So it's both getting our donor partners to meet the commitments that they've made, but also to seek ways that climate finance can be made more accessible to our members. Next slide, please. On the Pacific Med Council, this is a council that consists of the meteorological ministers. Under them, we have the Pacific Meteorological Directors, and then we have a number of different areas of work that we address. This is run closely with the WMO. WMO has their sub-regional office in the Pacific within the SPREP campus. So it's almost a seamless coordination between SPREP and WMO Region 5. Some of the work that we do through this arrangement is cross-cutting, and the primary purpose is to provide reliable climate information, not only for our members, but globally for those who want to use it, and to also be able to assess and analyze this climate information to make it useful for particular users, including farmers, disaster managers, and other key sectors, tourism, that was just addressed in the last presentation. Next slide, please. A little bit more on the Pacific Med Council. The Secretariat of the Med Council is the Pacific Meteorological Desk Partnership. This is housed within SPREP. It is a permanent secretariat, and we have a number of different projects that this partnership coordinates. Next slide, please. Weather Ready Pacific is the big initiative that our Met directors and Met ministers have put together. This is a programmatic approach to build the capacity of our meteorological services and hydrological services to provide the necessary climate information. It's the target funding that we're looking for is around $167 million US. We decided as a group that we would not be going to GCF for this because of the time that it takes to get GCF projects approved. So we've decided to go bilaterally to different donors. This year, there was a commitment from Australia for an initial $30 million to start implementation of Weather Ready Pacific. We have a number of other donors who are now lining up to work with us to start implementing Weather Ready Pacific. The initiative itself was approved by our members in 2021. Next slide, please. On the preparations for COP28, these are the key priorities that Pacific small island developing states will take. We have appointed a number of political champions to speak on our behalf. We found that this is a very effective approach for our region because not all our ministers can go. So those that are designated as political champions for different priority areas are able to speak on all our behalf as a region. Next slide, please. Loss and damage. This is an area that Pacific Island states have been championing strongly since Glasgow, but even before that, we're very happy that this is finally a formal area of work for the convention agreed from Sharm el-Sheikh. We're starting to work within our own region to try and look at how we implement loss and damage, especially the financial mechanism that will be discussed at COP28. We are hosting a loss and damage forum in July this year in Samoa to really have a good discussion amongst ourselves and our partners on how we can take this going forward. Mitigation and ambition is an area that we always push from the SIDS and from the Pacific. As you know, we are sometimes seen as the conscience of the world in making sure that ambition remains and that nationally determined contributions and the targets that have been made or have been declared by different parties are met. Next slide, please. On national adaptation plans, this is an area that we have been helping our members with. It's a niche area that we've found we've been able to support our members through GCF. We found the mechanism for doing readiness, and the national action plans is slightly easier than other areas of access to GCF financing. A lot of this we've tried to focus on ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solutions to not only look at the hard solutions, but to look at the more soft solutions that can be done through nature-based approaches. Next slide. Just a bit more context on how this is done. Maybe just to highlight that there is an initiative that we do with a number of partners called the QA initiative that has been quite effective in getting funding and piloting approaches to the community and other subnational levels that we normally would not reach through other financing mechanisms. I've outlined earlier the negotiation support that we provide countries. These are just pictures and the approaches that we took at COP27 and COP26 in Glasgow. At the pavilion, we had 75 events. An interesting thing at Sharm el-Sheikh is that not only the Pacific uses our pavilion now. We had a number of side events by the Caribbean, our Maldives, and even Mary Robinson came and held one of her events. So I must say we were one of the most colorful and had the most numbers at COP27, the Pacific Pavilion. Next slide. There's a lot of communications that we do with both through our own communications team, but also with the youth and journalists throughout the Pacific. Next slide. It's not only in science. We have tried to bring in the arts through poetry and artists who are part of the work of the pavilion. Next slide. On the Pacific Climate Change Center, this is a center that was set up by Samoa and Japan. It's not only a building, nice building that can be used for training and meetings and to house researchers, but also a program. It covers 4 main areas of work: knowledge brokerage, innovation, applied research, and capacity building. Capacity building both in person But one thing that COVID brought, an advantage that COVID brought with it was the ability to deliver things virtually. And this is something that we continue to build on post-COVID. Next slide, please. Climate finance. SPREP was the first regional accredited entity to the GCF, not only in the Pacific, but globally. So we have had a lot of experience with GCF. Like I raised earlier, it's not the easiest of funds to be an accredited entity to. There's still a lot of red tape and paperwork and shifting goalposts that have not enabled us to be fully effective as a accredited entity. This is something that we continue to work with the Secretariat. We have only been able to do this because our donors, especially New Zealand and now Australia, have been subsidizing this effort by providing additional funding that allows us to continue to provide this service to our members. Next slide, please. The PCU is how we, the Project Coordination Unit is how we provide this service, and we help countries with access to finance. So our figures are there in front of you. So we have been able to do things, but not to the level that we had envisaged and wanted when we set this up with our members. Thank you very much.
Sefanaia, thank you so very much for your time and for that incredibly interesting presentation. I wonder if you're comfortable sharing it.
Yeah, sure, you can, it's there with you. You can share as widely as you want. Yeah.
Thank you. We have the New Zealand Embassy with us online and they've asked for a copy, so we'll be sure to share it with our participants. That was incredibly interesting. Thank you so much. I'm pleased to see that the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Samoa, the Cook Islands, Niue and Tokelau, Simona, has joined us online now. I know it's also not the best time for you, so thank you so much. I'll pass the floor to you now.
Thank you so much, Katherine. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly, loud and clear.
So first of all, I would like to clarify that at the beginning of May, I moved on to a new position covering small island developing states from New York. I still wanted to join because I wanted to provide an update on the preparatory process for the Small Island Developing States 4th International Conference that happens next year. And I also apologize, I'm in between trains, so I will be very brief. So I would like to commend Safa for the presentation and for the work he's doing. SPREP is an important organization in the Pacific and hopefully an important organization in the process of preparing the successor agenda to the Samoa pathway. As mentioned, as I speak, there is a preparatory committee established that works closely with the host country, with Antigua and Barbuda, to close the 10-year framework of the Samoa pathway and propose a new vision that will go beyond the SDGs to 2034. But let me just refer to the topic first. SIDS are trying to define resilience within their work on the multidimensional vulnerability index that is supposed to provide access to financing to all countries, not only to SIDS, beyond income graduation, as access to concessional financing at this point in time is critical, both to provide to support progress against the SDGs, but also to go beyond that to net zero and to a series of other goals. As we know, in the recent presentation at the ECOSOC, the Secretary General informed that only 12% of the targets of the SDGs are on track, and there are 30% of the targets where we made no progress or we moved backwards, which is obviously quite concerning. So access to financing remains a critical prerequisite to ensure there is progress to the SDGs. So within the definition of the multidimensional vulnerability index, SIDS are also discussing about vulnerability resilience country profile to define resilience in each country's context, as resilience has obviously one meaning, which means bouncing back from all sorts of shocks and adverse effects, but also has some contextual aspects. Those vulnerability resilience country profiles are supposed to be adopted together with the MVI as a concept by the General Assembly this year. And we look forward to that, as we will have more clarity as to what financing is going to support in each of the small island developing states. Within the next 10-year agenda, SIDS are trying to be more targeted, more focused into their framework. So they're looking into first better defining their assets. SIDS are small, but they also manage large parts of the ocean as exclusive economic zones and territorial waters. And such assets would allow them to sustain growth using the concept of beyond GDP, which I'm quite sure everybody is aware of. So GDP is a measurement of economic performance every year, but which is called the flow. But there is a stock component that looks into the wealth of every country, and natural wealth is a critical component of that, together with human capitals and also with produced capitals. So we will start with that. So those assets exist, they have an economic value. How do we make sure that this economic value remains as a component of resilience? And additionally, they add to that, to the productive capacities, they will add they will add the social contracts, and they will also add climate action as an important component to ensure resilience. So this framework, as I speak, is in progress. Yesterday, the preparatory committee of the 4th International Conference met, and there is agreement that there will be a wide process of consultations, and I'm happy to say that within the process we will invite organizations from the Pacific, including SPREP and the SPC, the Secretariat of the Pacific Community. Maybe just to say that what an important event this year happens actually in the United Arab Emirates, which is COP28, an event that is looked at with a lot of hope by the SIDS, as they believe that there is an opportunity for a renewed commitment to the energy transition, climate mitigation, without which actually there can be no resilience as we all know it. So not sure to what extent those expectations are being taken into consideration by the organizers, but we are very hopeful that additional financing will come out of COP28 to support small island developing states to complete their transition, but also the rest of the world, as SIDS are extremely vulnerable to the rest of the world economic activity. So those are things that are happening as I speak, and we will soon have an opportunity to assess progress on the Samoa pathway. The event for the Pacific, for Asia Pacific, is already scheduled for 16th to 18th of August in Vanuatu, and before that there will be an assessment of progress in the Atlantic, Indian Ocean and South China Sea, and on 24th, 26th of July, and in the Caribbean and Latin America on 7th and 8th of August in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I will close by saying that navigating resilience is the only way forward that we can imagine. We do have some major threats facing us ahead. The completion of the SDGs would have been a basic requirement for us to have a future. We still have a few years to accelerate progress. However, for SIDS, time has a different dimension. At this point in time, what they have access to is insufficient to support their transformations. SIDS have primarily an issue linked to smallness with a very narrow fiscal space. It's very difficult to advance development without getting indebted, and debt management for countries, debt servicing for countries that have such a narrow fiscal space and no credit worthiness comes at a very high cost. So we need to remain together within an approach that would allow access to financing for all countries, but for vulnerable countries in particular, to strengthen their resilience. And I look forward to providing more updates. Again, I cover small island developing states from New York, all of them. And if there is interest for discussions on how the process of developing the new agenda advances and what we have learned through the Samoa pathway, have we managed to make any progress towards resilience through the Samoa pathway or not, is something that we will discuss soon, as mentioned, for Asia Pacific in Vanuatu, 16th to 18th of August. Thank you.
Simona, thank you so very much for your time, and congratulations on the new position. I'm sure the small island developing states are extremely pleased to have an ally in New York, such as yourself. I should also convey a happy anniversary to the SPREP as well for Sefanaia. So,
and to Samoa, if I may, apologies, and to Samoa, as I may. As we speak is the National Day, the Independence Day. The country is celebrating 61 years of independence, and again, the celebration is always on 1st of June. So that's a big day in the Pacific for my colleagues. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. So a timely webinar today then, and congratulations to Samoa then. Thank you so very much to all of our speakers today, Sefanaia, Andie, Simona and Basmah, for your insightful remarks. As we've heard, the world's small island developing states are really on the front line of the climate emergency. And as our esteemed speakers today have said, it's an existential threat to their existence. We've heard of the importance of supporting SIDS in resilience and to amplify their messaging in global climate engagements, including in the upcoming COP28 this year in the UAE. And we also heard of the importance of responsible and conscious tourism. So the 28 for 28 webinar series will be on hiatus this summer, and we will resume in September in the lead up to COP28 at the end of the year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.